Most people treat an argument as a verbal disagreement, but structurally, a logical argument is a mechanical system. It is an assembly of premises designed to load bear a specific claim. And just like physical engineering, the structure can be built perfectly according to the rules, yet still fail completely. You can have a flawlessly constructed logical framework that yields a totally false conclusion. The reverse is also true. Every individual premise you present can be historically accurate and factually true, but if the connective logic linking those facts is flawed, the entire argument collapses under its own weight. To master critical thinking, we have to decouple the factual truth of the data from the structural validity of the logic. We must learn to evaluate the framing independently of the building materials. Treating logic as a structural engineering discipline isolates exactly how and where a claim fails. It makes it much harder to be manipulated by persuasive but mechanically compromised messaging in media, academia, or the social sciences. We start with deductive logic. This is a closed mathematical system. In a deductive framework, if your starting premises are true and your logic is sound, the conclusion is 100% correct. The baseline model for this deductive engine is the classic syllogism. It is built with two foundational premises that lock together to support a single conclusion. Consider this classic sequence. Premise 1, all humans are brilliant. Premise 2, Aristotle was human. And the conclusion, therefore, Aristotle was brilliant. We are using the historical figure of Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosopher, to anchor the test of our premises. Here we encounter the validity paradox. Empirically, we know that all humans are brilliant is a false statement. But structurally, the validity of the conclusion, that Aristotle was brilliant, remains perfectly sound based entirely on the geometry of the given premises. Validity does not equal truth. But this absolute certainty comes with extreme fragility. To completely invalidate the conclusion, you only need to locate one single human being who is not brilliant. That single counterexample breaks premise 1, and the whole system topples. Deductive logic offers absolute mathematical proof, which makes it highly effective for philosophical inquiry. But that exact rigor means it collapses entirely upon contact with a single valid exception. When an argument fails, it often exhibits a logical fallacy. These are not necessarily lies. They are specific mechanical fractures in the connective tissue between a premise and its conclusion. The first major failure mode involves fallacies of relevance. This happens when the connective logic is intentionally severed, usually replaced by an emotional or aggressive detour. Argumentum ad hominem and argumentum ad populum are prime examples. Instead of addressing the mechanics of the claim, the arguer bypasses logic entirely to attack the character of their opponent, or attempts to whip up the emotions of a crowd to force agreement. Similarly, argumentum ad verecundium, or the appeal to authority, relies on intellectual giants. Simply stating Freud said it was true does not substitute for actual structural logic. A claim must bear its own weight, regardless of who uttered it. The second failure mode contains fallacies of ambiguity. Here, the structure warps because the definitions of the building materials shift while under pressure. If you use a single word in two entirely different senses, a flaw known as equivocation, or if you argue from faulty grammar, known as amphiboly, you create unstable, splitting logical paths that cannot support a solid conclusion. Identifying these specific mechanical failures strips an argument of its manipulative power. It forces the opponent to return to structural fundamentals rather than relying on rhetorical sleight of hand. The third and final major category covers fallacies of presumption. In this failure mode, the argument relies heavily on invisible, unverified foundational assumptions. Petitio principii, or begging the question, occurs when the desired conclusion is smuggled directly into one of the premises. The argument essentially proves itself by assuming its outcome from the start, creating a closed loop with no real foundation. The complex question fallacy works similarly. It forces unproven constraints onto an opponent before they are even permitted to answer, presupposing a condition that hasn't been agreed upon by the people involved. Presumptuous arguments successfully disguise a total lack of supporting evidence as self-evident truth, making them highly effective and highly unstable structural failures. Deductive logic is often too fragile to survive the physical world. Modern experimental science relies on a different framework entirely: inductive logic. Consider the initial observation phase of an experiment. A researcher in a coastal laboratory at sea level slowly heats water and notes the exact temperature at which it boils. This chart shows the data points. After dozens of identical results, a general rule is established: water boils exactly at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. But an anomaly occurs in Denver. The same experiment reveals water now boils at only 201 degrees. If this were the strict realm of deduction, this single anomaly would instantly destroy the entire underlying theory. But the inductive model absorbs anomalies. Rather than shattering, the system incorporates the new variable of atmospheric pressure to refine and expand the rule. Further observations introduce even more variables. Testing pure water against salt water yields entirely different boiling points. These new datasets continue to expand the overarching rule without breaking the engine. Inductive logic willingly sacrifices the absolute mathematical certainty of deduction. In exchange, it generates robust probability, drawing general conclusions from specific experiences that grow exponentially stronger with every subsequent experiment. We possess two distinct logical engines for proving a claim, and each operates with radically different structural properties. The deductive engine powers mathematics and philosophical inquiry. It offers 100% absolute certainty at the steep cost of extreme fragility. The inductive engine fuels the scientific method and empirical observation. It offers no absolute certainty at all, only an infinitely scaling probability that adapts to new data. A critical error in analysis occurs when someone tries to evaluate an inductive, probabilistic scientific claim using the absolute binary rules of deductive logic, or attempts to force absolute certainty onto a probabilistic system. In either system, identifying fallacies is essential. Spotting the mechanical breakdowns in an argument's connective tissue is the only way to prevent ourselves from adopting structurally compromised conclusions. True critical thinking relies on rigorous mechanical inspection. It requires mapping the actual architecture of a claim, isolating the premises, and proving exactly how and if that claim can support its own weight.